Hello, in this video, I am going to explain aggregate supply, both in the short run and in the long run. We will also discuss uh, shifting of both short run and long run aggregate supply curve and movement along these curves as well. So this is long run aggregate supply curve. That is a vertical line exactly at YFE. By YFE, I mean real GDP at full employment. So the total amount a country can produce using all resources is represented by a vertical line that you can see on your screen. This is known as the long run aggregate supply line or long run aggregate supply curve. Same thing. Potential real GDP, by potential, I mean full employment. Always potential means full employment. So potential real GDP is not dependent on the price level. So you can see if you have a vertical line that represent full employment, real GDP, it does not depend on price index. So whatever be the price index on the vertical axis, the country's capacity to produce is same, that is YFE. This is the full employment level of real GDP. So this is the maximum this country can produce. Now I superimposed a short run aggregate supply curve that you can see is an upward sloping curve that says AS1. We don't write SR for short run as we did for long run. So in long run, we do write long run aggregate supply, that is LAS, long run aggregate supply. Long run, L is for long run. But we don't write short run SR AS. We just write AS1, that is short run aggregate supply. So aggregate supply, that is short run aggregate supply, is flatter before the full employment real GDP. If you notice this red line before the full employment level of output, that is YFE, the curve is pretty flatter. And as the curve crosses potential GDP or long run aggregate supply curve, it becomes more steeper. Now, first, I'm going to discuss what are the factors or why we have upward sloping aggregate or short run aggregate supply. What is the reason behind it? So the reason is given here. As prices rise, and by prices I mean GDP deflator, real wages decline. By real wages I mean purchasing power. So wages divided by price level, that is real wage. So if price index is increasing, it means your real wages, your purchasing power of your money is decreasing. So when real wages decrease, it means now the cost of production is also decreasing, because now in real terms, producers can hire worker at a lower real wage because of higher prices. Of course, this will result in higher profits. And it causes an increase in aggregate quantity supplied. There's no shift in the aggregate supply curve. We move from one point to another on the same aggregate supply curve. Why? Because producers are producing more because of the changes in the price level, which is taken on the vertical axis. So if any change in the variable that is on the vertical axis, you move along the same aggregate supply curve. There's no shift. Shift will take place when factors other than this price index change. Now I discuss the shifting of short-run aggregate supply. That is, what are the factors that shift aggregate supply short-run, remember, to the right. So in the diagram, you can see that I shifted AS1 curve to AS2. That is a rightward shift. Notice I did not shift long run aggregate supply, that is LAS curve, which is at full employment level of GDP. Remember, whenever the cost of production decreases, producers are willing to produce more because of high profitability. This decrease in costs of production is not necessarily because of the price index. So at the same price, there's no change in price index. Price is same, but cost of production is decreasing. Let's say because of decrease in input prices, not the real wages, but nominal wages are decreasing, or other prices of inputs are decreasing because of government regulations, because of taxes and subsidies. All these factors will impact somehow on the cost of production. So if cost of production is decreasing, that will give incentive to producers to produce more. And therefore, short-run aggregate supply curve shifts to the right. Remember, the country to produce is still at YFE. That is reflected by this vertical long-run aggregate supply curve. There's no change in long run. So suppose if the country's capacity to produce is $100 worth of goods and services, that is still be the same. There's no change. But producers are willing and are producing more. So short run will increase, but long run, the capacity is the same. Now, what I've done, if you look at the title of the slide, it says shifting of long run aggregate supply. So I shifted long run aggregate supply curve, that is potential GDP, LAS, to the right, but I also shifted short run aggregate supply curve as well. The title says only shifting of long run aggregate supply curve. Remember, when long run aggregate supply curve shifts rightward, suppose the aggregate supply curve, that is short run, move to the right by the same amount as well. So let me give you an example. When cost of production decreases, short run aggregate supply will shift to the right without impacting long run aggregate supply. When long run aggregate supply increases, short run aggregate supply must also increase. Now we have to find out, or we have to discuss, what are the factors that shift long run aggregate supply to the right. That is, what are the factors that will contribute to economic growth? Because the capacity of a country to produce more over the year is nothing but economic growth. So these are the 4 important sources of economic growth. Number 1, increase in labor force. I am not saying increase or decrease in the cost of hiring workers or wages. I'm talking about labor force. So suppose if more female workers are entering into labor force, so now we have more labor force, and therefore these workers can be hired and can produce more. So your capacity to produce will increase. Or maybe international migration. So suppose if workers from South Asian countries or from other countries are coming to northern countries or developed countries, then they have more workers. So their capacity to produce will increase. Similarly, all these 3 factors of production, that is increase in labor, increase in capital, it should be K, not L. So it should be K. Let me just give me a second. So I just changed this to this is actually capital. This is K, not L. So this is K. This is not L. Okay. So this is not L. This is K. Increase in capital. Then increase in natural resources. So suppose if a country finds new oil reserves, that will increase the capacity of a country to produce more goods and services. And therefore, this curve will shift to the right, LAS curve shift to the right. And then finally, technological improvements. So maybe you have new technology that will increase the productivity of the existing workers. So there's no increase in the labor force, but the workers who are already working, they are now more productive. So the capacity of this country to produce goods and services will increase. So all these four factors will actually increase or shift the long run aggregate supply to the right. And of course, all these four factors will also increase the short run supply as well. So therefore, I will shift both curves to the right. But remember, the distance must be the same. So if you look at these two blue circles, that these two blue circles show that the increase in the long run aggregate supply and increase in aggregate supply, the magnitude is exactly the same, is identical. Because if you look at the distance between these two red curves and these two green curves, this distance is identical. So in this video, I just talked about aggregate supply, short-run aggregate supply, long-run aggregate supply. Why short-run aggregate supply is upward sloping, and then we talked about the shifting of short-run aggregate supply and long-run aggregate supply. Thank you.